Okay, now we're ready to talk about our still life composition. So you'll see here, this is my final piece. Now, how did I get to this final piece? Well, in Adobe Bridge, I've imported all my photos, I've renamed them, I've marked which ones I like, and I've said this one's 1 star, but this one's 3 star, and you can filter to just that image. Remember, double click to open it up. Right, now once you're here, what I want you to do is I actually want you to crop your image. So you'll see here's the crop tool, and there's different proportions. And the proportion that I would like you to use is 5:7. All right, and if it comes up this way, you can just rotate it this way. Now remember, you can resize this. And I want you to be purposefully cropping your image to be exactly how you want it to be. And then you can either press return or double click it, and now it'll be cropped. But you say, hey, wait a second, what about going on over here in my final piece? It looks like one smooth background. What I want you to do is also use the clone tool. And the clone tool, or the clone stamp tool, allows you to clone one section of your image onto another. So it turns into a little brush. Use the bracket tool or up here to change the size of your brush. I think it's nice to leave it as a sort of soft brush and make it a little bit bigger, right? You'll use the Alt on a Mac or the Option on the PC. Hold down to set where your source image is going to be, and then where you want it to actually go, and then you can drag it. Now you can see I'm cloning from over here to over there. And I want to do the same over here. So now you can see that I'm sort of just fixing my background, resetting my source and setting my background. Very nice. So now I've cleaned up my background a little bit and I'm ready to move on. So the next thing I want you to do is we're going to add an adjustment layer. Now, I talk a lot about making non-destructible changes. There's a lot of ways to make your image black and white, but if we just go to Image, Adjustment, Black and White, once we actually make it black and white, it's no longer adjustable. I've lost all that color information. So the best way to do that is to add an adjustment layer, and you'll notice here are all the adjustment layers. All right, so basically just find the adjustment layer for black and white, click on it, and it adds a layer. Now you can go in here and you can change sort of the intensity and the grayscale of each one of these values. The reds, yellows, greens, cyan, blue, and magenta. So say for example, I know my background is blue, I want to make that a bit darker. My fruit has a lot of yellow, I want to make that a bit brighter. So you can manipulate that. And because this is an adjustment layer, I can always go back in and change it. So that's non-destructible changes. That's something that's really important with working with photography. All right, so the next thing that I want you to do is to go back into your image, and we want to just sharpen it up a little bit to make it look really nice and crisp. And so how do we do that? Well, first thing I want to do is I want you to duplicate this layer. You can go over here and you can just click duplicate, or you can do Command or Control J, and that just duplicates the background layer. So we don't want to do any changes that we can't get back. So now I've duplicated my layer and I'm ready to sharpen. But wait a second, I've made a bunch of changes and I don't want to lose these. So what I need to do now is I need to File, Save As, and save it as a Photoshop PSD file. So within my folder, if you click here, it sort of brings it up. You can save it probably like Still Life Composition. So remember, a PSD file is a Photoshop file, and that will save the multiple layers. A JPEG is a flattened file. So while you're working, after you make your first change, you should right away save this as a PSD file. All right, so I've duplicated my layer. I make sure I'm on my layer that I want to work with, because remember, whatever layer is highlighted is the layer you're working with. I want to go Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And I want to just slightly sharpen my image. And here is where you can see the preview. All right, this is the amount, this is the radius. You'll notice when I make it really high radius. It's really sharpened my image. You don't want to do too much because it starts creating a halo effect and distorts your image. So, but just slightly, you know, I might do like, you know, 2.5, 3%, maybe like 50. You can turn preview on and off, see how like very slight changes, and I say okay. So I'm just going to name this sharpened because I sharpened this layer. All right, so I have my black and white filter. You'll notice I turn this on, turn this off. Have very different my images. All right, I have my sharpened layer and I have my original background layer. Whenever there's a story, you want to be frequently file saving. All right, and that's Command S or over here file save. All right, so the next step, you want to make a new layer for each color you're going to be adding because you're going to be hand coloring your image. So over here, you can do new layer, or you can do Shift Command N, new layer. Something to be aware of is that it will add a new layer for wherever you are actually located. So since I was on this layer, it makes a new layer above. What you need to do is make sure you drag this to the top, because if it's under the black and white adjustment layer, it's going to turn black and white. So just make sure it's on the top. Something I'd like you to do is to go into Adobe, the color, and explore and look at some of the themes and you want to work with. So I really like this one. You just go to Edit, and then you can grab the hex value, which is right here, and you're like, you know what? I really want to make my hairs this beautiful yellow. So I Command C, I copy it, and then I go right here and I paste the hex value in. So that's the hex value I'm using. And this is nice. I want you to sort of play around with looking at some of the themes, changing like the color rules, Nagless, monochromatic, triad, complementary, compound shades. This is something that I want you to actually sort of play around with. Remember, you want the hex value, and you add the hex value when you double click right here. All right, so now you need the brush tool because you're going to actually be painting. And whoa, my brush is really big. You can go over here and you can make it smaller. You can change the hardness. I want it really nice and hard. And you can also use the bracket tools, the right bracket to make it bigger, the left bracket to make it smaller. And I'm just going to be painting sort of back in. Now I'm not doing a very careful job here. You're going to be doing a more careful job when you're actually working on your project. So I'm coloring this in yellow. You're like, wait a second, this looks horrible. It's just a giant yellow. Looks almost like a banana, yeah. So there's a bunch of different things you can do. You can change the opacity. So just adding a very slight sort of coloration. The fill will do the same exact thing, all right? So you can change the fill or opacity. You can also change the blend modes. So you can play around with these. Maybe I want to do overlay. Maybe I want to do light in. So you can play around with the blend modes. I'm going to go with overlay, and I'm going to go just a slight opacity at 34%. Anytime you do a new color, I want you to make a new layer. So, and I want you to get into the habit of naming your layers. So double click on it to actually name your layer. And I was like, you know what? This is actually color yellow. Return, and there you go. I'm going to make a new layer. Shift Command N. I'm going to call this color blue. Or I'm going to, you know, I'm not sure what color it's going to be. I'm going to say color background. Okay. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look. And I want to have a complementary color. So, ooh, purple. This is perfect. I'm going to copy this hex code. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to change the foreground color and say OK. And I'm ready to make my background. I go back over here. I look for my brush. I want this brush to be a bit bigger. And I go in and I color it. And I'm just going to cover this all up. And remember, since these are layers, I can bring this layer below. And maybe I want to make this an overlay. And change the opacity lower. So remember, when you do blend modes, it affects all the layers underneath. All right? So if this has a blend mode, it will now be affecting the purple that I added underneath. So every time you add new layers, it will change the way it looks. So I want you to play with all of this until you make an image that you like. Your option after you finish is to save another version, and you would do that file save as, and I'd say version 2, and go in and play around and change it up. and do different iterations and see how changing the blend modes and opacity and fill actually change your image. When you are all done with all of your iterations, same as always, file, save as, change this to a JPEG, and then hit save. Make sure quality 12, okay, and upload to Haiku.